so today, as we finish the series, we're diving into the deep end. Does that fit? Doesn't fit with shallows, does it, sort of? I don't know. We're diving in because what we have to do to finish the series is really kind of address a really hard topic. And so it's crazy to wrap our minds around this, but in Jesus' day, in the Apostle Paul's day, when the Apostle Paul was teaching and writing these words to the people that he was writing them to, like the idea that they talked about and that we're going to unpack here was absolutely scandalous. Like it rocked the culture. Why? Because here's the crazy part. Because the idea that a man would submit to a woman was absolutely ridiculous. Just ridiculous. And fast forward to 2019, like it is the key to healthy and Jesus-centered relationships and marriages. But how? Like, how do we do this? How do we get to that point? Because I thought, like, from culture, wherever, growing up, like, the man is the decision maker, right? The man is the king of the castle. And whatever the man says goes. Like, right? That's how we should do this. But what if the man takes this too far and doesn't learn how to mutually submit? And if he doesn't, he'll just maybe go along and pretend that everything is okay just to get what he wants. And mutual submission is this beautiful thing and can absolutely change our relationships and our marriages and bring so much joy to life if we allow it. And after 24 years of sitting in my office with both men and women and couples together, if I learn this one truth from Jesus and the Apostle Paul, like it would change everything. But just a heads up, if you want a relationship that's Jesus-centered, it's going to be more complicated. It's going to take a giant dose of humility. I love this quote by Zig Ziglar. Many marriages would be better if the husband and the wife clearly understood that they're on the same side. Whew. I mean, that would change so much. The reality is so many of our marriages, our relationships are complicated because we're not on the same side. We don't think what's best for the other, but so much of what I want, what I need, and what I need to do to get them to let me get what I want. Like we keep score, right? Like we keep score. We can't do that. We just can't. You bought this, so I deserve this, and that's not fair, and I did this, so you should do this. The reality is, like, we need each other, and we're made for each other. In Genesis 1:27, in the very beginning of Scripture, God lays it out for us. He said this, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Right from the beginning, we're told the reality is we need each other. So the next time you look in the reflection in the mirror in the bathroom and you have negative thoughts about yourself, or the enemy whispers these voices that are negative, remind yourself that you were created in God's image. You were created in God's image. And like we talked about last week and week 2, you're an intricate creation. You are not an assembly line creation. Like God put so much care into creating you. And we're made for each other. Like we can continue to believe that the world revolves around us, or we can live a different way and submit and help other people. Well, welcome to week 4 of It's Complicated. Whew! 4 weeks we've been in this series. And we talked about our relationships and how we make them so much more complicated than God intended them to be. And the first week, we kind of talked to you single folks, and we said, hey, like, so many of you feel like you'll only be whole when you find the right person. And so you want to become the person that the person you hope to find wants you to be, instead of just becoming who God wants you to be and finding contentment and peace in that. And so we challenged you to become who God wants you to be. And then the second week, we talked about communication. Like one of the craziest areas of marriages and relationships. And really the thing that kind of kinks up the whole system a whole lot if we don't get it right. And we talked about the myth is I'm not a mind reader. And that would be super helpful if we could just read each other's minds. But the reality is the truth we talked about, we got to communicate through love. And we opened up 1 Corinthians 13 and we read love is patient and love is kind and love does not envy and it's content. And we kind of went through that and we said you got to communicate through love. And I challenge you to figure out your spouse, your partner, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your friends, the people you do life with, their love language. And then to communicate to them through their love language. And that's just a powerful thing. And then last week we talked about this myth, I did it, so Jesus won't ever love me. And then we talked about how, oops, I did it again. And so Jesus won't love me. Is that a song? Oops, I did it again. It's really embarrassing that I know that. I should not know that. I should not know that it's a Britney. Oops, I did it. I should not know that. Just horrible. But we talked about how, like, for some of us, maybe we grew up thinking like our virginity is this idol. And if I just stay pure, if I don't have sex till I'm married, everything's going to be perfect in my marriage life because I've kept my virginity pure. And then we find out, well, that's not really all, that's all to it. And then maybe we have these judgments towards people who maybe didn't follow it that way. And then we maybe think, okay, oh no, I've had sex or I've made poor sexual decisions. How could God actually forgive me and love me? And he's going to love me even less. And we said, hey, how about this? How about you realize your sexuality, this is a precious gift from God. So instead of giving it away like candy, we say, hey, I'm going to cherish this because it's special and it's precious. And God intended it for the marriage bed. And so I'm going to hold off into that. I'm not going to create an idol out of it. I'm not going to give it away like it's candy. But I'm going to live in that. And we learned that instead of like God's going to love me less, we learned that my value is in Jesus. It's not from who I had sex with. It's not what those kind of things I've done. It's not in my sexual identity. None of all those things. It's the fact that you are a child of God. Whew, I'm already sweating. And so today, the last week, we're going to talk about this myth. The myth is the man is the king of the home. The man is the king of the home. Oh, boy. And we're going to talk about the truth. You don't love down. You don't love down. Some of you are like, how is this a myth? I am the king of my home. Once I get home, the dog's at the front door. My wife brings me my slippers and the paper. She has an apron on. The kid's hair is perfect. The house is perfect. There's ESPN in the background. There's like a misting smell of like bratwurst. Like it's just beautiful. I sit down in my chair. One of my children come up and they put my feet up and my wife rubs my feet. Like this is the perfect scenario. Like how could it not be perfect? I am the king. Kind of reminds me of watching Leave It to Beaver as a kid. Those of you under 40, there was this show called Leave It to Beaver. You could find it on YouTube. It's going to be in black and white because color didn't exist in the 50s. It's just crazy. And so you'll find this, and this is how it was. Like Mr. Beaver came home. Is that his name? Or Cleaver? What was his name? I don't remember. Is it Mr. Cleaver? It's not. Mr. Cleaver. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, welcome. We're so glad that Facebook has now kicked us offline. But thank you for joining us. Mr. Cleaver. But he would come home, everything would be perfect. He'd put his thing, she'd run out of the kid. Like, this is like absolutely how it was. I can remember talking to my grandfather, my wife's grandfather once, before he passed. And we were sitting there talking one day, and he found out I was a cook. I worked at a restaurant as a cook. And he's like, so do you make your own food? And I love Clyde. Like, your grandfather was an amazing man. He was amazing. But not one day in his life he made his own breakfast, his own lunch, his own dinner. Like, if he was hungry, he said, Noni, which was her grandmother's name, food, woman. I mean, I don't know if he said it like that, but, like, that's kind of how it went, you know? And I sat there, and I'm like, I grew up with a dad who was a construction worker, tough. I know some of you know my dad, and you see him now, and you're like, oh, Bob Raitz, he's a wobbly guy. But, like, he was a tough, gruff guy, muscles, sledgehammer. Like, he would come home covered in cement and dirt. Yet, like, I just saw my dad, like, shoulder the workload at home. Like, it wasn't like you're the woman, so you do this, and I'm the man, I do this. I just saw this beautiful thing about mutual submission. And I learned that from my parents. I should have put it on the screen, I forgot. But there's this great Christian satire site called Babylon Bee. And they're getting into a lot of trouble nowadays because people don't understand that not everything on the internet is true. It's just not true. Like, you can literally put on there, like, I like oranges, and then you could get all this hate. Oranges are horrible. I hate oranges. You know, like, this is my opinion. Like, I'm just putting on there. But this Babylon Bee, it said this. It said, this was the article. Man shows sacrificial, Christ-like love for his wife, by throwing socks in general direction of laundry basket. Like, all right, wow. Wow. Now, I'm sometimes horrible at this because I have a bad back and I use that as an excuse for everything. Everything. Jason, why are your socks in the tub? Well, my back hurts. I don't know. I can't. I don't know if you heard about this, but Amazon is having horrible problems with Alexa. She's listening to everything and keep taking great details. Well, they're releasing a male version called Alex, and they don't have to worry because he doesn't listen to anything. It's just perfect. It's just perfect. And even though in my marriage, Tracy, for the most part of our 22-year-old marriage with our oldest is 19, even though she's been a stay-at-home mom most of our marriage, I don't assume her role is to clean up after me or my kids. That would be a pretty exhausting job. Even one of my kids, 2 of my kids, 3 of my kids, 4 of my kids, 5 of my kids. I mean, that's an exhausting job. But it's just crazy how even today, we still have these interesting myths that are in our head. For instance, these are not myths. These are actual laws still on the books about how backwards our society still is when it comes to men and women equality. For instance, it's an actual rule in Congress. Women cannot wear sleeveless tops or sleeveless dresses to Congress. I mean, they just can't. I'm sure, somebody can, a dude could show up, in a suit with, cut off sleeves, and people be like, yeah. Here's another one. An unmarried woman in Florida cannot parachute on a Sunday. Real law. Real law. This one just stinks in Michigan. A man cannot seduce a corrupt single woman. Really? Then who can you seduce? Come on. That's horrible. Sorry, that one was bad. This one is horrible and it's disgusting, but in some states, child marriage is still legal. It's just horrible. True law, look it up. In Michigan, a wife must obtain her husband's permission before she can cut her hair. It's still on the books. And women, if you want to move to Tucson, Arizona, you can't wear pants. Women can't wear pants in Tucson. It's just, there are some of these things that are so, I started thinking about this last week, and I asked Michaela, our connections director, to do some research for me, and she found me these. Because in the TV show Parks and Rec, they make light of governmental things, and they make light of some laws in Pawnee, and some of these things still exist. If we're going to bust the myth the man is king, we got to understand the truth is you don't love down. You don't love down. Love is mutual. Love is not, oh, I love you way down there. Love is, I love you. And God taught us this by sending his son Jesus to be with us. God is not some far-off celestial being who does not want to be close to his children, who doesn't just want to reach his hand down and tap us on the head. He intimately longs to be involved in our lives. And he sent us the greatest display of his love by sending his son Jesus to this earth to live a perfect sinless life. And he who had no sin became sin so you and I could have a personal relationship with God the Father. And so because of what Jesus did on the cross, because of his beautiful forgiveness, when we come to him and we repent and we confess and we say, my life is not my own, it's yours, we get this beautiful display of love. And in Ephesians chapter 5, we see a beautiful example of this type of submission. This type of submission. And before we head into this, as I was researching and studying this passage of scripture, I came across a very amazing talk by a pastor by the name of Andy Stanley. He pastors a church in Atlanta called North Point. If you follow along in my Next Steps email that I send on Tuesdays, I've given you a couple links to his messages the past couple weeks. And his material on this was amazing, so I thought I'd share it with you. Ephesians 5, 21, 24. This is from the Message. This is the Apostle Paul says, out of respect for Christ, be courteously reverent to one another. Wives, understand and support your husbands in ways that show your support for Christ. Okay, done. We're done. Amen. That's all we need to do, right? Wives, understand and support your husbands. Beautiful. That's it. This is a tidy message. Let's go home. But there's more. Then Paul says, the husband provides leadership to the wife the way Christ does to the church. Not by domineering, but by cherishing. Oof. So just as the church submits to Christ as he exercises such leadership, wives should likewise submit to their husbands. Ooh, like you feel that? Like there's some tension in the air. We don't like that word submit, do we? Like we really don't. And this is where a lot of people get tripped up. And actually why some people have left the church, because they're like, they read verses like this and they're like, this is archaic. This is all about male dominance and all of this other kind of stuff. And I'm done with it. And so if it bothers you, I'm glad. Like maybe some of you have wanted to give up before this. But here's the thing. Like if you don't give up and you dig into it, it can become transformational. Because our English Bibles were once written in the Koine Greek language. And the literal translation of the Greek of this verse, verse 22, where in the NIV it says, wives, submit to your husbands. Verse 22 in the Greek says, wives, to your own husbands as to the Lord. Wives, to your own husbands as to the Lord. Now here's the thing. In the oldest Greek manuscripts, there's no verb. There's no submit there. And so this is so important to know, because the Apostle Paul's audience heard this and about the women and the wives submitting, and their response was like, no duh. Like, of course we're going to submit. And we hear this and we're sort of like, huh? Huh? Like this doesn't make sense. It's the other way around. And in Jesus' day, in Paul's day, this didn't surprise anyone. No one was offended, because men in that culture had legal jurisdiction over their family, over their wives, and their children. So they weren't like, huh? They were like, no duh. This is the dumbest thing we've ever heard. Like the women were like, he could trade us if he wanted to. He could get rid of us. Like that's how poorly women were treated in that day. And this was what Paul was doing, is the typical way of doing things, because you make a statement with a verb, and then in the next statement, you infer the verb from what came before. So the verb submit is inferred from what came before. So what came before? This is the game changer. Here's the verse that set the tone. In verse 21, it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And in the Message, it says, out of respect for Christ, be courteously reverent. So in verse 21, he's saying submit. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. And every time Paul tells us to do something, here's the crazy thing about reading about the Apostle Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament. He points us back to Jesus. And so if you have crossed the line of faith and you have said, I commit my life to Jesus, I've gone public with my faith in baptism, I'm a Jesus follower, I live for him, like you want to know and get a scorecard of how you're doing with living your life for Jesus, just read Jesus. Read the stories of his life in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in the Gospels of the New Testament, and see, okay, wow, okay, Jesus is pretty kind to the least, lost, and the last. Am I? Okay, wow, Jesus is, like point yourself back to that. The thing that's crazy is like Paul is saying submit to one another out of reverence. And here's the thing, the submission is mutual. The submission is mutual. And the crazy thing is when he says submit out of reverence, that word reverence is like a sense of awe. It's a sense of awe in light of all that God has done, in light of how much he's forgiven you. Like have that sort of reverence when you submit. All that awe does not just go to God, but it goes to the people in our lives. That's why Andy Stanley, I love this quote, he says Christian marriage is a submission competition. Submission competition. I don't know if any of you are super overly competitive. I don't think I'm competitive, but every time I do like a strength finders test, competition comes up. I would say the exact opposite for my spouse. She's probably not that competitive. The only things I really have to win in is like in ping pong. Like I have to win in ping pong. Or if the dude's being a tool, like I'll just let him win. Like I don't care, that's fine. But I just like, but this is where we've competition is a good thing. Like especially in our relationships and our marriages. Christian marriage is a submission competition. And this is what makes marriage amazing. This is what makes a Jesus-centered marriage work. Like here it is in a nutshell. I'm here for you, you're here for me, but I'm here because God was here for me and I'll be here for you. Wow. It's not I'm here for you because you do all this stuff for me. It's I'm here for you, you're here for me. I'm here because God was here for me, so I'll be here for you. It changes everything. And here's the thing. Paul, the Apostle Paul, is about to give a very disruptive application. So he starts with this common ground. He knows that everyone knew that wives had to submit. No duh. They were property. They had to submit. But then Then he goes into this crazy part. And I know what some of you ladies are thinking. Like, you're starting to think, like, you're starting to make a list of all the men that you think are worth submitting to. And I did a survey. 100% of men aren't worth submitting to. Like, bam, the survey says it came back. Like, it just came back. And I'm lumped into that. Like, I think of our first 20 years of marriage. Like, I'm not worth submitting to. I've put my wife through so much crap over the years, especially the first, like, 15 or 20 years. Especially as I've tried to figure out some contentment issues in my life, and I mean, so much of that stuff. And how she has consistently still wanted to put my hopes and dreams and desires first is an absolute miracle. Like, I just don't understand. And that's what Paul's saying. Women, put your husband's hopes and dreams and desires ahead of your own. Not because he expects it, because your heavenly Father asks you to do it. Oh, jeez, that changes it. Like, again, to Paul's readers, this didn't seem all that abnormal. But what came next was so disruptive to the culture at the time. Then he says these words, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. The guys were like, wait a minute, we know this story about Jesus. He was put up on a cross and was crucified. Like, I'm not loving my wife that much. Like, there's no way. And so like, the men are like, Paul, you're telling us we have a responsibility towards our wives? They're just not an object? They're just not a commodity? They're just not something I own? No, Paul's saying. This was brand new. It was scandalous. And this is the reason why we get worked up when we read this, because we in 2019, we embrace the equality of men and women. This is why we don't get worked up, because we know that men and women are equal. But here's the great news. Here's the great news about this. And this is the crazy part. Guess who introduced the idea of equality to the world? And who declared women equal to men? I'll give you a hint. It's the Sunday school answer, and that is Jesus. Absolutely. And this is why I think every woman, whether you believe in God or not, should be a Jesus follower, because he argued for your value, he argued for your worth and your dignity. And he showed a broken, messed up, backward society that women were not second or fourth or fifth place, but women were gifted with leadership, and they were meant to lead, and they were meant to be loved in the same way that men were to be loved. And this confronted men like a brick in the face. Like, he was saying, you're not more valuable to God than men. Like, you are both equally valuable. And this is why women flocked to Jesus. They supported him. They supported him financially. Like, his ministry probably wouldn't have happened. Like, these women worked hard and gave money so his ministry could happen. And coincidentally, they were the first people to see Jesus after he rose again from the dead, which makes no sense at all. Because in those days, in a court case, women couldn't testify. Their testimony would mean nothing, because they were a woman. And so why would he have women see him first? Because it was another way of him to elevate their status and elevate their equality. And that's why Jesus is so freaking amazing, because he was always elevating the status of the least, the lost, and the last. He elevated the status of children. He elevated the status of the disabled. He elevated the status of the prostitutes, of the people who were left out, the people who were down and out. He loved them. And that's why we exist as a church. We have to be a church that cares for the least, the lost, and the last, that continually says, you know what? We're not going to give up on people. That'd be a beautiful moment for you to go, amen. That's it. That's where we got to be. And so this is why we put our spouses first. This is why we put the people in our lives first. And so Paul then points out in Ephesians 5:25-28 how we go about this. He says, husbands, look at the screen. Husbands, go out in your love for your wives, exactly as Christ did for the church, a love marked by giving, not getting. Christ's love makes the church whole. His words evoke beauty. Everything he does and says is designed to bring the best out of her, dressing her in a dazzling white silk, radiant with holiness. And that is how husbands ought to love their wives. They're doing themselves a favor, since they're already one in marriage. This is what it teaches us. We got to level the playing field. The playing field has been leveled. Jesus was always leveling the playing field. This is why in our relationships, like it matters so much about how we want to help make the other's hopes, dreams, and desires become a reality, not just our own. The submission has to be beautiful. It's his best over hers and her best over his. Here's a great way to think about it. Not my or me, but you and us. Not my or me, but you and us. Sometimes I've asked men, like, what have you done to make your wives' dreams come true? And when they say something toolish like, well, she gets to live with me, like, I'm done. Like, we're done. Jesus may love you, but I'm out, man. Like, I'm out. I got a tool meter, and it works really, really well, and we're done. This is really tough. Like, I know, like, for some of you, it's sort of like, well, what does Jason do all week? Does he just sort of sit around and then, like, listens to Hootie and the Blowfish and then kind of gets up and he just talks about, well, this whole message has basically been my life for a week. Well, for 4 weeks now, because I study it, I talk about it, you know, and I talk about it with Tracy, I talk about it with, you know, staff. I mean, so it's just all swirling. And so I was asking myself these questions, like, have I really done this in my marriage? Because I can think of a million ways where I've put my needs ahead of hers. And so I texted her this morning, and I said, hey, just be honest with you, like, have I ever done this? And so she's still in bed, and she snapped a photo of Kai. Kai's our adopted son from China. He still sleeps in our room. This is pretty normal in post-adoption, especially from kids from orphanages overseas. And so it's not ideal that he's still in our room, but I'll just say that, wink. But she snaps a photo of this beautiful boy laying next to us, and she just said, here are my hopes and dreams. Like, we have amazing kids. We adopted this beautiful boy. And I just thought for myself for a second, like, okay, like, whew. So for you and I, like, if we're not gonna love down on people, but we're gonna mutually love them, we gotta cherish the people in our lives. Paul says, go all in your love, exactly as Christ did for the church, a love marked by giving, not getting. Like, does your spouse know that you cherish them? I talked to a couple not too long ago, and the spouse said, I haven't heard them say I love you in probably 3 years. It happens. Like, we get into the rut of life, and we just assume they know I love her. They know I love him. They know. But do you communicate that? And then just one other thought for you as we think about this mutual submission. Like, love without debts. Okay? Love without debts. Don't make your relationship about you owe me. Right? I did this, so you owe me now. Like, no offense to men, but this is how we think sometimes. And to be honest, like, we think like, okay, I did the dishes, you know, maybe it'll be a good night. Like, for Pete's sakes, you did the dishes. Like, whoop-de-doo. Like, help with those kind of things. Here's the thing about debts. If you owe me money, you can't give me money because it will feel like a payment. Then I might not be grateful, and I might ask, where's the rest, right? In a relationship where someone feels like the other owes them, it's tough to extend love. So how do we keep these hopes and dreams and desires from becoming and feeling like expectations? We answer this question. What does he owe me? What does she owe me? And the answer is nothing. They don't owe each other anything. They don't owe each other anything. They know that they owe each other everything, but that they don't owe each other anything. And I know that doesn't make sense, but it does. In a Jesus-centered relationship, like, they continue to give to each other. I've talked to spouses, and we still hold the mistakes our spouse made 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago against them. And we can't do those sort of things. And we push them that way. Great relationships and marriages are a submission competition. Both are racing to the back of the line. There's no competition or bargaining. And we got to keep reminding ourselves, I owe her everything. I owe him everything. Because the reality is kindness does not equal love. Andy Stanley calls this the platinum rule. When you're not sure what to say or do, You just love like God through Christ loved you. Ooh. When you're not sure what to say or do, you just love like God through Christ loved you. Here's the reality about life. Less self people are happier people. Less self relationships are richer relationships. So my challenge is to you, make this a submission competition. Make it a submission competition. Submit because God was here for you, and you'll be there for them. So here's how I thought we end. I thought we'd pray for the men. We thought we'd pray for the men. We're going to give you a Gillette razor on the way out as well. But how amazing if that's how we lived. Like, we didn't put up with status quo anymore, and we don't let boys be boys, but we teach our children, no, we stand up for the rights of others. And we don't treat people that way. So men, here's what I thought. Would you stand with me, men? And I'm going to pray for you. I'm not going to ask you to like raise your hands or dance or hold hands. No. But I'm going to pray for the men. Let's pray. Oh, nice. Look at this. Let's pray. Father, we come before you and we pray for the men of our church. God, we just pray that these men would view their relationships as a submission competition. How can we continue to love and serve and submit in a way that glorifies you? God, may we be kind to our families and the people in our lives. God, may we race to the end of the line. And Lord God, may we put the needs of others ahead of our own. And we ask this in your name. Amen. And so men, before you sit down, I thought we'd pray for the women. So ladies, would you stand up? I know. After the first, somebody came up to me and they're like, I knew it. You were just going to pray for the men. The men get the prayer. And then I asked the women to stand. So let me pray for you, women. God, we just come before you and we thank you for these women. God, I thank you that you have given these women gifts of leadership. And God, I pray that you have given us this amazing ability to have relationships. And so God, may we submit to each other. May we live out this beautiful submission competition, God, this mutual submission. And so God, we just pray that you give these women strength. Pray that you give them wisdom. We pray that God, that you would use them in powerful ways. And we ask this in your name. Amen.